Hi, Richard Wheeling here, co-founder of Benmore Technologies. And as we've been able to bootstrap our company to a headcount of 50 over the past year, I thought it'd be a good idea to introduce ourselves, outline what we do, outline some of the things that we've learned over the last year of growth, and outline what we're looking to do in 2026 and going into 2027. Who are we? Who is Benmore Technologies and what do we do? Cutting through all the AI buzzwords and all that stuff that's getting thrown around right now, we essentially utilize extremely talented developers who are tooled with agentic coding tools, namely Claude Code, internally here at our company, and some internal IP that we've built to what we call hydrate Claude Code, but it provide business context, internal business context to Claude Code to rapidly develop software for startups and SMBs. The second service that we provide is we create that three-pronged approach for mid-sized companies at a individual level. So we'll go into a mid-sized organization, work with their staff, build out some internal IP for them, and train their staff on how to use their now tailored version of Claude Code to get the most out of their day-by-day tasks. I think it's also important to outline what we don't do. So what we don't do is we don't build end-to-end agentic workflows. Frankly, we just don't think that that's the best way of implementing AI. There's some research to back this. There was a report released in 2025 by an MIT research group, and it essentially outlines that 95% of AI implementation projects, I think they studied all business segments, so SMBs and enterprise, failed. And the 5% that succeeded were implemented at the individual level, and they were mainly focused on manual tasks that could have been automated. For example, a lot of BPO was essentially automated away, and also a lot of spending 2 hours creating a presentation. However, it was most efficiently utilized at the individual training level. And currently, that's our position on the best way to implement AI in organizations is take your existing team. Why don't we create a tailored version of essentially Claude Code or Cursor or some agentic tool, and also develop integrations into said tool with your existing tech stack if you're working out of a CRM or some sort of HR software, whatever. Essentially hydrate an agentic tool and then train staff to utilize it as, for lack of a better word, like an assistant. It's not meant, in our opinion right now, to completely replace positions, but what it can do is it can weaponize positions for better productivity. And another thing that was outlined in that report was the initial reluctance from larger organizations to adopt AI because of the lack of immediate bottom line impact. And that's kind of true. If we take our position on Claude Code and our service offering, where I go into your company, we deploy one of our talented, we call them forward deploy developers, and embed on your team for a couple months, we learn your workflows, we essentially what we call skillize, but basically create a whole bunch of custom prompts and reusable systems. And then we also integrate all of your existing systems into this core agent, and then train your staff, support your staff, monitor your staff, and gauge performance. That's not something where you're going to see immediate bottom line impact. You'd have to measure the productivity gains over the course of at least a couple quarters to really deter, and you'd have to hedge that. I haven't worked at a mid-sized company, but you'd have to hedge that against projections as well. Essentially, all that you're going to get immediately is just more productivity from your existing workforce, which can be a little bit abstract to derive a definitive bottom line value towards. Regardless, it's our position that that's the best way to utilize Claude Code. I mean, it's the ethos of our company, right? So if we go back to our core service offering, we are doing that to rapidly develop software within our own company, and we found a business use case. We're not sending off an autonomous agent to just create software end to end and talk to the client, completely remove the individual from the loop. But where we are seeing a lot of measurable impact is within our internal processes. One developer can output more quality code to a multiple over a developer who's not. It also has allowed us to flatten hierarchies here at Benmore Technologies. So we don't need project managers on our projects. Essentially, weaponize an extremely talented individual to perform the tasks of multiple jobs at the same time, And we found a business use case for that here internally on the software services side. But every mid-sized company, and I would assume every company in general, can realize that impact as well. So in a nutshell, those are the two core things that we do is we've utilized our own methodology to create a business use case for us in terms of developing software, but then we also work with mid-sized organizations to realize the same impact within their existing processes and workflows. Let's go into some of the things that we've learned. So going off that core ethos that I was outlining earlier, indexing on talent. So talent is becoming the most important thing, at least here at Benmore Technologies. Again, for those reasons that I outlined earlier, you need an extremely multifaceted talent base. And our team needs to be extremely skilled in software development to get the most usage out of agentic coding tools. But they're also forward deployed. They're in contact directly with the client. So they need to develop the skill set of soft skills, relationship management, expectation setting, boundary setting, time management, etc. All these other things that aren't necessarily taught in a traditional pure computer science curriculum at a university. So because of that, one thing that we learned early on was like, essentially, we put a lot of time and effort into the development of these soft skills. And that's downstream from myself and my co-founder being and freelancing for years and being able to outline a playbook for our team to follow. But it's just an interesting sort of development. Something that we learned is that we need to index on talent and then also need to provide the tools and training to develop new skills on the job. And so we put a lot of time and effort behind that. And so something I really didn't anticipate, but it's definitely sort of progressed as a core component of our company as we grow. The next thing, and I actually took this from the previous company that I worked at, which was Epic Systems, is ownership and autonomy. So if we're taking the assumption that we need extremely talented individuals who are willing to learn new skills, what is downstream slightly from that is also cultivating an environment in which ownership and autonomy over projects or a book of business is encouraged. And that, again, is something that I saw at Epic Systems. I think that's something that they did extremely well at Epic Systems. And it was outlined very early on that there's ownership in the role. And for someone who is extremely talented and is intellectually curious in terms of exploring new processes and sort of owning processes end to end, you essentially need to cultivate an environment of autonomy and ownership, especially in services and consulting. There's no way to systemize every minute nuance that can arise in a client engagement. So much of it is predicated around feeling like you're in control, and then also just having the skills to sort of navigate complex human relationship situations that arise essentially when you're in a client-facing and relationship management role. Now, that being said, there is a bit of a caveat that we've learned with that as we've grown. Cultivating an environment surrounding talent and ownership and autonomy is great. And I think it's especially most useful at the beginning stages of a company. But our head of FDE, head of forward deployed engineering, Arkish, he was our third hire. And he had a conversation with one of his family members who had some experience either investing in companies or growing a company. And he said, beyond a headcount of about 10 is where you start seeing a necessity for some level of guidance, some North Star, as we call it here at Benmore, to align the team as a whole towards the direction that they're going. So we can have extremely talented and hardworking individuals here at our organization, but unless there's some North Star that they should be working towards, that incredible level of hard work and efficiency can be misguided, right? It's essentially like a vibe-based company. There's no sort of directionality on sort of the goals of the company. So because of that, I learned what KPIs are. I'd never heard that word before, but we've developed a set of KPIs. And again, it's nuanced, right? Like you can't holistically just systemize and processize everything, especially in this client-facing role. But what you can do is at least give some metrics your team should be working towards so that there's very clear sort of understanding of where this great culture of hard work, autonomy, and talented individuals should be working towards. It reminds me of, I think it was called the Medallion Fund. Gosh, I forgot the name of the founder of it, but it was Renaissance Technologies. And again, I heard this anecdotally, so I don't know if this is necessarily exactly what was going on at Renaissance Technologies. But from my understanding, he made an effort to hire the smartest people in the world, essentially put them in a room together and say, you have one key objective, that's to essentially make returns against the market. It was so effective that they stopped taking outside capital. They only reinvested they only allowed team members to buy in to the, again, I don't know the terminology here, but like the liquidity pool or whatever funds are being allocated. And then also just used company profits to sort of regenerate growth. And that's sort of what we're seeing come about here at Benmore Technologies. It's like we need to index and have the most talented people, preferably in the world. Of course, we're limited by that. I wish I could pay people $2 million a year, but we need to find as talented people as we can. We need to essentially provide them guidance and a tool set. But then beyond that, we just need to make sure that they're working towards a common goal and there's understanding in the direction that they should be working towards. Something that we've seen emerge from that is we call the office that I'm in here, we call it the FDE desk. And it's essentially, I have never worked in finance, but it's sort of getting cultivated into a very high octane environment, that's my last point here on lessons learned. We just need extremely talented individuals who are working towards a North Star. Again, that's just an interesting thing that's developed over the past year as being extremely important for our organization. The last thing, and this goes a little bit into our company culture, might get a little bit meta, but it's essentially work ethic. We're based here in Chicago, and that was a decision that we made early on. There was a whole bunch of circumstantial things as to why we ended up in Chicago, but my father's side of the family has been in Chicago for over a century. And one of the things that he told me very early on in my life was, he said, Richard, and I think I was like 8. He was like, Richard, so long as you work hard, most things in life will figure themselves out. Chicago is the heartbeat of America. City of the big shoulders. I think it's the best city in the world. I mean, you're not going to argue with me against that one, especially in the summer. But it's undeniable the culture surrounding work here in Chicago, and I think by extension in the Midwest. And the reality of growing a company is just that it's hard. It's really, really hard. It's extremely important in the early stages, especially in the early stages of a company, to understand the level of work that goes into growing something. And on top of that, growing something that's bootstrapped. It's just incredibly hard. And because of that, work ethic needs to be cultivated here at the company. And the reality of our company is that we don't have funding. We have a good support network in terms of people that we can reach out to for advice, but we also don't have advisors. Every dollar earned here at Benmore Technologies is earned. It is created from our own methodologies, our own explorations and learning about sales and marketing and sales process and defining and iterating our process over and over and over again. And it's just hard work. And that's just kind of the reality of it. And so because of that, I get personally a lot of fulfillment from one, seeing the incredible output from our team and alignment with what we're trying to build here. And then secondly, just being in a city that cultivates a sense of ownership, a sense of pride, a sense of humbleness, and a predication around hard work. I think it was Jensen Huang who said that there's hard work and then there's insanely hard work. And any which way you try to dance around the fact, you kind of come back to the same conclusion that it's just hard. And it's the reality of the situation. And we need people who take enjoyment in that work ethic. And we want people who want to work hard. And it's a necessity. And again, something that just, I don't think it was learned, but just became very sort of prominent as we've grown the company is the necessity of a work ethic. And especially as we're in our foundational stages here, an extremely hard work ethic as well. So let's talk about what we want to be doing going into the rest of the year and 2027. We view our line of business at the SMB and startup level as essentially the equivalent of our seed funding. The reality is we were essentially pigeonholed into that market early on due to the bootstrap nature of our company. We couldn't deal early on with 6 months of sales cycles. We had to outline and lay out a lower ticket offer with a smaller sales cycle that essentially allowed us to continue to reinvest company profits back into marketing and then also allow us to have some breathing room for operational expansion as well. So because of that, we had to find a line of business that one, you could have a high level of new customers through paid advertising. And then on top of that was a low enough offer in terms of like financial offer that it could justify our ad spend, but then still allow for the expansion operationally. And that was the SMB and startup market. Now, like I said, we have spent a year understanding through and through, and it's a core component of the job description, is to stay intellectually curious about the new AI developments. And honestly, what we've seen in the past year is like in the past year and mainly in the past couple of months is unprecedented. It's unprecedented the level of development in these AI tools. And so because of that, our sort of three-pronged methodology here, which is talent plus staying up to date with coding tools and then developing internal technology that will expedite our internal processes and hydrate coding tools with our internal processes, we've just seen that expand rapidly. And I got a chance over the past couple weeks to discuss kind of the needs of some of our mid-market customer base. And one key thing that most companies agnostic of industry, and again, I've only talked to our mid-market clients in 3 different industries, so I don't know how far this spans, is I think a lot of mid-market companies know that they can get productivity gains out of essentially agentic tools, but they don't know how. And if we go back to that research report that I was outlining earlier, where they were talking about the failed AI implementation projects, but if you look at the successes, it's at the individual level. So our thesis is we know how to use these tools and we can prove it with a business case. We can prove it by the growth of our company. We can prove it with our financials that we have found a way to essentially, develop a business case by doubling down on AI tooling. Why don't we work with your company over the course of a couple months, embed on their team, learn a specific divisions or departments processes, develop wrong the internal IP that works natively with coding tools. And then we train your staff, we monitor and support your staff for an extended period of time. And then essentially we leave, right? And in doing so, the analogy that I use is like, we kind of want to be like shock troopers in a sense, where we just come in and over the course of a couple months, we provide an obscene amount of productivity gains to mid-sized companies. And then we make the system self-sustaining and self-sufficient. And then as we retreat, for lack of a better word, until we're needed to be called in again. As much as I believe in this system and I believe in the service that we can offer, the reality is that's just not how sales works. So we have some internal things that we're developing on attacking that. And what's probably going to be is we're going to start doing that we will work with one team member of a mid-sized organization, show productivity gains on a small scale, and then with internal backing, roll that out to more team members within an organization and continue to build upon an IP base for our mid-sized companies. That's going to be our core focus over the coming year and going into 2027 is developing a sales process, developing marketing, developing a repeatable methodology to bring in more of those contracts and understand the pain points when we go into these projects, what's working, what's not working. And almost maybe most importantly, how can we properly identify and derive a specific bottom line value? So how can we develop some sort of metric or projection that will show that bottom line impact if we're going in and essentially weaponizing existing staff? You're not going to see an immediate bottom line impact in a day with our version of an AI transformation project, but you would over the course of a couple quarters. But even then, it's a abstract value to derive. How can you measure minute productivity gains? So that's something that we'll be looking forward to be doing in 2026 and 2027 is of a way to derive bottom line impact and sort of rolling with the punches and figuring out what a actual productive AI implementation project looks like. Not one that's predicated around hype or buzzwords or because someone high up in the organizational hierarchy said that they just need some AI project to go and then they go sideways and $1 million is not. No, taking the time to actually work with teams on an individual level and then measure said bottom line impact. That's what I'm very, very, very excited for. And like I said, we're viewing our existing line of business and we'll continue to develop it as essentially our seed funding. And we're going to utilize that to attack this mid-market offering and then hopefully very long term have enough firepower to punch up and go to the enterprise level. But yeah, we're slowly working our way up the market here and everything that comes with that and everything that comes with company growth. It's like I said earlier, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of work, but it's going to be fun. So I'm very much so looking forward to doing that in the coming years. If you're interested in viewing our actual software development processes on a foundational level, on our website, there's a book called Forward Deployed. It's free. You can download it. It's about 100 pages and it goes through exactly our process end to end when it comes to developing software with AI. And I'll probably end up writing another sort of manifesto in a year or so once we nail down what actual AI implementation projects and transformation projects look like at the mid-market level. So anyways, a little bit lengthy perhaps, but thanks for joining in. And yeah,